Imagine this. You're crawling through the mud of the battlefield, bullets streaking above your head like a storm of meteors. And then you realize the comrade fighting beside you, wearing the same uniform, isn't a man at all. She's a woman disguised as a soldier. How is it possible that in a world ruled by rigid masculine codes, women risked everything, life, honor, and identity just to join the fight? This isn't folklore. Military archives from France, stories from World War I, even records from Russia, all reveal the same astonishing truth. Women who cut their hair to the scalp, bound their chests, forged names, and slipped through the cracks of the system to enlist as men. Some fought for years without anyone discovering their secret until a gunshot wound forced a doctor to uncover the truth. Others, once unmasked, were not shamed but praised, remembered for their courage on the front lines. But the burning question remains: why? Was it pure patriotism, a thirst for freedom in a world that caged women, or something more personal, revenge, love, or the desperate search for a life beyond society's chains? That's the mystery at the heart of this story. A reminder that bravery doesn't always wear a beard or stand tall in polished boots. Sometimes it hides behind the most fragile disguise. So, why would a woman risk everything? Her life, her body, even her very identity, just to pass as a soldier? To answer that, we need to look back. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, the military was an exclusive club, strictly for men. Women, at best, they were allowed to serve as nurses, cooks, or in logistics. But war has a way of cracking doors open. Historians like Deanne Blenton and Lauren Cook, in their book They Fought Like Demons, 2002, uncovered countless cases of American women during the Civil War, 1861 to 1865, disguising themselves as men to fight. Some fled from forced marriages. Some sought revenge for murdered families. Others simply refused to be caged by domestic life. And Europe had its own stories. Take Flora Sands, an Englishwoman who joined World War I as a nurse but ended up fighting on the front lines in Serbia. Or Nadezhda Durova of Russia, a noblewoman from the Napoleonic era who lived as a man under the name Alexander Sokolov and became a decorated cavalry officer. The context was brutal. Back then, women had almost no access to education, politics, or even control over their own lives. For some, war wasn't just about patriotism, it was a jailbreak. Disguising themselves as soldiers was a ticket to freedom, even if the price was death. Records from the Imperial War Museum in London describe women whose identities were only discovered after they were gravely wounded. Think about it. For years they marched, slept, and bathed alongside male soldiers and still managed to keep their secret hidden. So this wasn't simply about women wanting to fight. It was about crushing social walls, breaking open locked doors, and rewriting the rules. And that's what makes these stories even more powerful. Because behind every disguise, there was a private motive, a secret, often more dramatic than the war itself. Picture the year 1914. The world erupts into the Great War. Europe set ablaze. Germany, Britain, Russia, France, Austria-Hungary, every empire throws millions of men into the trenches. This isn't an old-fashioned war with swords and cavalry. This is modern slaughter. Machine guns, poison gas, tanks, and endless barrages of artillery. And caught in the chaos are women disguised as soldiers, living the most dangerous double life imaginable. They had to fight with the same furious men, all while hiding their true identity. Records from the Imperial War Museum, and They Fought Like Demons, Blanton and Cook 2002, give us glimpses of these stories. Flora Sandis in Serbia. In 1915, when Serbian forces were being crushed by Austria-Hungary, she stopped being just a nurse. She marched into battle shoulder to shoulder with men, even surviving a grenade blast that nearly killed her. Her conflict was clear. If she failed, she wouldn't just die. Her entire secret would be exposed right there on the battlefield. In Russia, the legend of Nadezhda Durova, a noblewoman turned cavalry officer from the Napoleonic Wars, was revived as propaganda. But beyond the myth, there were real women hiding in plain sight. By 1917, Russia even formed an all-female combat unit, the so-called Women's Battalion of Death, led by Maria Bochkareva. Many of its recruits were women running from broken marriages, abusive homes, or suffocating social rules. Now, imagine their daily life. Not just bullets, but suspicion. Sleeping shoulder to shoulder in muddy trenches, bathing in rivers under watchful eyes, getting treated for wounds by military doctors. Every moment risked exposure. One slip, one careless gesture, and their disguise was gone. And beyond the mud and blood, there was betrayal of another kind. The great powers weren't fighting for freedom. They were fighting for empire. Britain and France clung to colonies. Germany dreamed of expansion. Russia was crumbling under revolution. Meanwhile, the soldiers, men and women alike, were pawns on a chessboard they didn't control. Archives from the Russian State Military Archive tell us that in 1917, during the Kerensky Offensive, Bochkareva's women's battalion was thrown straight into the front lines. Hundreds of them died in vain because of chaotic strategy and political games, while leaders in Petrograd argued over power. So the conflict here wasn't just war against an enemy. It was layered. Humans against foreign foes, women against patriarchy, individuals fighting for freedom against a world determined to trap them. And slowly, reality crept in. They knew the truth. No disguise could last forever. The secret would be uncovered, whether by a bullet, by suspicion, or by betrayal. A frozen night on the Eastern Front, 1917. The sky burns red with artillery fire. The ground shakes as if the earth itself wants to split open. Trenches echo with screams, smoke, and the stench of blood. And here, at the front lines, the women in disguise can no longer hide behind their uniforms. The Imperial War Museum records the story of Flora Sandis in Serbia. At the Battle of Dobropol, she was thrown straight into the fiercest fighting. A grenade exploded at her feet, blasting her body into the air. Blood poured from her leg. And in that instant, her secret was revealed. Her comrades realized she was a woman. For a heartbeat, the entire unit froze. But instead of collapse, something else happened. Her courage in the face of death became the spark that kept them fighting. In her own memoir, she wrote, "I was no longer a nurse. I was a soldier, and I would die a soldier." In Russia, the story was no less brutal. According to the Russian State Military Archive, during the Kerensky Offensive of 1917, Maria Bochkareva and her Women's Battalion of Death were sent straight into the storm. Bullets rained down. Male soldiers around them panicked and broke ranks, fleeing for their lives. And then came the moment of truth. Bochkareva shouted, "Forward or die." Many of her women stood their ground, even knowing they were marching into certain death. Dozens fell instantly, yet their defiance shamed the retreating men into turning back, rallying to fight once more. But the price was cruel. Survivors often had their disguises stripped away. Some were mocked, others discharged, even punished for breaking rules they had already bled to uphold. Yet paradoxically, their bravery was etched into history. Women who were supposed to be spectators to war became the reason entire units did not collapse. Blanton and Cook's "They Fought Like Demons" notes other haunting cases. Women whose secrets were exposed not by choice, but by wounds. Shot, burned, or torn apart by shrapnel, they faced a tragic decision: reveal themselves to doctors and lose their identity as soldiers, or remain silent and risk dying without care. Picture those moments. Blood dripping onto the mud, uniforms shredded, their bodies trembling between life and death. And inside, a single thought: if I give up now, all of this, every sacrifice, was for nothing. That was the true climax, a war no longer fought between nations, but inside the soul of a human being, willing to gamble not just life, but identity itself to stand unbroken in the heart of hell. And when the guns finally fell silent, when the smoke drifted away, one truth remained: their secrets could never stay buried forever. But here's the thing. Their story didn't end in the blood-soaked trenches. The real twist came after the guns went silent. Many women who had risked everything, who had bled beside their comrades, ended up dying a second death, this time on the pages of history. Records from the Russian State Military Archive show that after the war, the government disbanded the Women's Battalion of Death. Survivors weren't honored as heroes. They were mocked, dismissed as frauds or disgraces for defying their supposed destiny. Women who had stood in the front lines were shoved back into kitchens as if their courage had never existed. Other revelations came in ways far more bitter. Blanton and Cook in "They Fought Like Demons" recount cases where women's secrets were only discovered after death. When their bodies were prepared for burial, their comrades realized too late that the soldier who had fought and suffered beside them was in fact a woman. Imagine the shock and the guilt of knowing you had never truly seen the person who stood shoulder to shoulder with you in hell. And the cruelest irony? Records of women's contributions were highlighted briefly, but later altogether erased. Traces of them can't be found anywhere. Think about the bitterness of that. You gamble your life, you spill your blood, you stare death in the eye, only to be told, Thank you for your service. Now disappear. That's the darkest twist of all. These women weren't just fighting enemies across the trenches. They were also fighting an enemy far more insidious: forgetfulness. A silence that can erase bravery more completely than any bullet ever could. And so, history records them in faint ink. The names of women who disguised themselves as soldiers rarely make it into school books, their faces rarely carved into monuments. But their courage still pulses, whispering something greater than a tale of war. That bravery has no gender. That in a world which said, "You can't," they stood and answered, "I can." As historian Pamela Toller reminds us in Women Warriors, many of them eventually returned to ordinary lives. Some became farm laborers. Some went back to their families without ever being recognized as veterans. Others simply disappeared, their stories buried in dusty archives. And yet, perhaps that is the point. They didn't fight for medals or to be remembered. They fought out of love. Love for their homeland, for their families, or for the life they believed was worth risking everything for. And maybe the most powerful words came from Maria Botchkoreva, commander of Russia's Women's Battalion of Death, who once wrote in her memoir, "If I die, bury me in my uniform, because here I am truly myself." That quote reminds us, courage is not measured by how long our names are remembered, but by how fiercely we fight against the limits the world tries to impose on us.